All right, there we go. Okay, hi Phil, and listeners of the Travel Write Earn podcast, blog, YouTube channel. Slightly irregular, but I've got a very interesting guest on today, Phil Thomas. Thanks for joining, Phil. Slightly different one today because Phil is not what you would call a super experienced travel writer. In fact, I think it's probably fair to say, and correct me if I get any of this wrong, Phil, later, but you've been doing it for less than a year, probably.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
But I thought a really interesting case study in doing what so many people would love to do, which is having a career, having dreams of kind of travel writing on the side, and turning that into actually, I mean, I wouldn't say it's your career yet in terms of income, probably, but from starting from zero, no experience, not even from the media industry or writing industry, as far as I can tell. But then becoming a travel writer, now published in the BBC Travel, in Travel and Leisure, in Conde Nast Traveler, in the Independent newspaper, in Food, Wine and Travel. So you've got numerous very cool paid stories out there in some very cool outlets. And you did it in the space of a few months, basically. So maybe you can start. I'll shut up, Phil, and you can maybe just give us a little bit of your background, because I think you were in IT. So give us your background as to what you were doing and why the change, why travel writing.
Yeah, sure. So thank you, James, firstly for having me on. Feels very surreal kind of talking about it in this context, given I've listened back to quite a few of the editions with people in the industry for 10 or 20 years. So definitely no comparison there. But yeah, so I was in basically white collar corporate jobs for 18 years. My most recent job, I was an operations director at one of the big UK banks. I was an obsessive traveller. So most people who knew me from work, you'd have the conversation about, are you on holiday again, or have you just come back from somewhere? And I was always the person around the like the water cooler who, when someone said, oh, we're thinking of going to Italy or Croatia or somewhere, I'd always be the know-it-all who would be like, oh, have you thought about this, that, etc. I'd done a travel writing course, I think it's 2023, when I was still very much full pelt in the day job, and it was overwhelming because there was so much that I had absolutely no idea about. The business side of it was complete zero, and the actual writing side of it, I always thought that I wrote fairly well, but it's a very different game writing, in a business context, when you're kind of proposing to get funding for something, or to convince your bosses that what's just happened hasn't been a complete disaster, despite knee-jerk reactions. So yeah, I mean, look, the tipping point came that I was told I was going to be made redundant from that job. I knew about it quite a way in advance. I just turned a milestone birthday that begins with 4. I can just about come to terms with admitting that now. And so I guess I had that kind of, I guess, the lightning bolt moment of, well, travel writing was always something that I wanted to do, but I'd never really, beyond that one course, taken any steps to actually progress that beyond being an interest. And it was actually on the evening that I'd got the news that I was going to be put on notice, that I was talking to my partner and actually articulated that rather than go and look for the next rung on that corporate ladder, well, why not actually pursue something that I'm genuinely passionate about? So that was end of last year. And yeah, at that point, I had no experience whatsoever. I'd never, I'd written blogs for different charities I've been involved with, different kind of context, but that was never really edited particularly. So yeah, you're right to say zero kind of experience. And so yeah, I started thinking about it, bought a couple of books. I did an online travel writing course over a period of 3 months, which actually kind of taught me, I guess, how to write, but then also the basics of how to start pitching, how to think about where you're going to research. And there was feedback involved with that. I think I joined your Travel Writing Skool right at the turn of the year, because what became fairly clear to me early on was that actually, if you get a commission to write an article, then great, you're in a great position. But you've got to actually convince someone to take a chance on you. And if you've got nothing behind you, no network, no experience, well, you need to make damn sure that your pitch is half decent. So I guess probably I can go into the different steps that are on the journey if that's helpful. But I guess probably the overriding theme was, if you look at someone trying to break into the industry of any capacity, your odds of getting anything published are long, without doubt. And so you're never going to turn yourself from the rank outsiders to the favourite, but what are the steps and what are the kind of the processes you can go through to actually reduce those odds so you have a chance? And that's all I ever wanted, is that ability to pitch something which I was passionate about, that I knew I could write something well on, and have an editor read it. Firstly, that's a good start, and get to the end of it and think, well, there's actually an interesting idea there, and not immediately kind of cast it out because I've made some basic mistakes along the way.
This is an excellent point. I think a lot of people come to travel writing and they're kind of looking for that moonshot almost, which is throw an idea out to an editor and hope they buy it, and then they get kind of disappointed and disillusioned when they don't hear anything back. But that's precisely because of what you've just said, basically what you just described, which is that's a moonshot. And then sure, you might win the lottery. Somebody wins the lottery every week, right? But it's unlikely to be you. And so there are stepping stones you need to go through. A lot of pre-work, basically, you need to do before you start sending out those pitches to paid outlets, to paying outlets. So maybe just summarize very quickly what those stepping stones were for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think actually I'll if I can just suck up for a moment, I think you actually recorded a video which helped kind of shape some of this that I found on the Travel Writing Skool. But so I get the first part, which you didn't mention because it's something I want to do for myself, is was to actually undertake a course in travel writing. I did one through the Ultimate Travel Journalism UK course, I think it was called, which could go at your own pace, but I was keen to get it done in about 3 months, which involved understanding the industry, crafting articles you got feedback on, crafting pitches, crafting emails to PRs, all kinds of things that I still use as almost templates on a regular basis. I set up a blog, Someone Else's Country, because if no one's going to publish you at the start, then you need to self-publish, but just show kind of the range of stuff you can write on. So there's some listicles on there, there's a couple of there's some narrative pieces, and I still try and update that with a new piece every week. Partly is almost to kind of, when I visit places now, I'm just keen to get stuff written about it, but also to keep me sharp, because the nature of writing is it can be quite feast or famine. The next step after the blog was set up was to pitch for non-paying bylines, which I know that there's quite a debate about that within the wider kind of freelancer industry of should you ever offer your work without pay. But if you're coming in new, I didn't really see any other alternative, and actually the process of being edited and receiving that feedback made my writing better. So it wasn't like I got nothing out of it. Plus, as well, from a blog point of view, if you can get backlinks and all of that to boost your blog's awareness on Google. So it's all this kind of ecosystem. So I think I had about half a dozen of those, and again, all kinds of different articles, from narrative through to kind of roundup guides to first time in somewhere, and different destinations too. The first one I ever had published was on Turkmenistan, which was purely as a kind of, this is somewhere other people won't have been to, most likely. So I would hope it pops in an editor's inbox, and that worked. That was for TravelMag. And I went to a conference called TravelCon in the US. I think it was March this year, which is part writer, part content creator. I'm very much wanting to go down the writing route. I enjoy Instagram, but it actually takes me far less time to write an article than it does to produce a reel. I don't have patience for it. Yeah, I see what people put out there, and I'm blown away by the skill and the creativity. And then I try and do something even a tenth of that myself, get to about 3 hours and get very angry with my phone, which is not a good place to be. But use that to get some sort of networking, met some people who were in it was the International Food, Wine and Travel Writers Association, which is a very long acronym, but was able to work with them to actually become a member of that group. So again, building that network and the opportunities that come with that. And so that probably takes me through to, if I fast forward, that was from the start of the year till about end of May. when I got to a point where I thought, well, I've now got these, the portfolio, I've got the blog, I've got, I think, a much better network, and I've got that kind of support infrastructure. So things like the Travel Writing Skool for my, pitches, the opportunity to actually share those weekly and get feedback. That was the point of kind of taking the leap into actually sending things out to paying publications whose travel sections I had read for decades, but who always felt like, when you start out, that feels like something that's 3-4 years away. But I guess it was a case of you don't ask, you don't put yourself out there. The worst that can happen is someone says no, unless you really balls up by using the wrong name or by sending it to the wrong publication. More likely you'll get ignored, but how are you ever going to know?
Yeah, I think that's excellent. Yeah, so you did a travel writing course, set up your blog to just start writing, putting stuff out there, started writing for free, which is a very controversial topic. I recommend it, particularly for people in fact, probably exclusively for people in exactly your position. You need to get some bylines to show paying editors that another editor has actually reviewed your work and you've been published by somebody who evaluates your work.
Yeah.
And then once you've got all that in place, then you can start pitching out for paying outlets and going down that road. But I guess even at that point, fear and doubt and uncertainty in your head about whether this is going to work out for you. This is a very common theme. I didn't realize how common it was until some of the questions from my email list came in for you. It is, the questions is, did you ever suffer from fear and doubt about whether this is actually going to work out, and how did you get over that?
Well, it's not a past tense thing. I still have that, if not daily, on a weekly basis. I mentioned at the start that I'd taken redundancy for my job. So right now, this is my job. I'm a travel journalist, and there's a finite period of which I can say that before I need to start looking for other jobs. My older relatives say proper jobs because it's still a weird conversation to have. So yeah, it's certainly not a one and done thing, and it's interesting that you go from in a corporate job. I found emotions were quite managed. They were in quite a defined set of parameters. That good days were, kind of good, bad days were bad, but there's no. You don't get the first time I got the Travel and Leisure was the first commission I secured, and I'd sent a pitch out to the editor. I chased up 2 weeks later because I was told that's what you needed to do. In my own head, it was like, well, you may as well do it, but I mean, come on, if they didn't reply to your first email, what are the chances? And that same evening, I was sat at home watching TV and saw it come through on my phone, and it actually was a leap off the chair, as though England's just won the World Cup. That was how it felt. To actually think that someone was willing to pay for a piece of work that I had produced. Now, I hadn't actually gone through all of the scenarios of, well, hold on, they might not like the article, or they might not, it might be one of these that gets commissioned and then the editor moves on and it just goes into a black hole. I didn't think of that. I was just like, wow, I've actually got something here. But yeah, the kind of the imposter syndrome certainly hasn't gone away as a result of having items published. I can be candid and say a couple of the publications that I got something published for the first time have said no on the second article. Others who I wanted to get into with what I thought were actually better pitches than the ones that were commissioned have either ignored me or passed. So I think something I've learned is it's a world away from if you're in I say corporate jobs, but I'd imagine most kind of salaried regular jobs, that you're developing a very thick skin quite quickly. And I know it's not it's not personal. If someone says no to you or ignores you, you're probably one email of several hundred that they've got in the inbox. I mean, you know this, James, from your background far better than me. And it's a bit like, I guess, if you're a recruiting manager and you get a load of CVs in, you don't go through looking for reasons to say no to people. Quite often you give a CV a 30 seconds glance, and if you're trying to get, say, the last job I ever recruited for in my last job, I think we had 80 applications in for, and I was planning to interview 5 or 6. So if I put myself in that position and go, well, we turned away for that some really good people just because there were slightly better ones, and apply it to the journalism situation, it's probably very similar. But when you're on the receiving end of it, it's hard not to think, well, does that mean I'm never going to get another commissioned? Have I lucked out? Did I fluke these first ones? And you do get kind of the almost, because it's quite a solid, it can be quite a solitary exercise. You get kind of the voices of doubt in your head that come and go. But equally, I sent out a couple of pitches, chaser pitches today. If one comes back this afternoon or in the next couple of days with a yes, are we back to being on cloud 9 again? And so in the early days, I think something that I've found is actually taking a deep breath periodically, that the highs are not as high as you probably perceive them to be, and the lows are not as bad as you've got to kind of, I think, keep quite a steady head, which I'm good at saying. I'm probably not quite there in believing it all the time, but that's part of the exercise.
Well, look, your experience has probably also shown you that it's so much just depends on that idea and the right being in the right place at the right editor in the right time, and the other stuff that probably is taking so much mental energy actually doesn't factor anywhere near as much as you think.
Absolutely. Probably the best example I've got of that, it was there was something that, so one of the things I didn't mention I did, but I think anyone who's setting out needs to do, is set up their profile on TravelMedia, and with that you get editor alerts, and there was one that came through from the new editors seem to love sending things out saying we'd like pitches, which is great, who was looking for the different angles on well-trodden destinations, and I sent her a pitch. I actually sent her 2, and of the 2, the weaker one, in my opinion, was of a town in Tuscany that I've been to 4 or 5 times, that I think is a really fantastic place to base yourself in, because it's on the train line, you don't need a car, and it's not as overrun as Florence or Pisa or Siena. And she came back within a few days and said, Ed, basically, goodness, I was in this same place last summer, and I completely agree with you. It's somewhere that more people should know about. Would love to write you about that. So, as you've said, James, another editor that would have been just passed, it may not have even been read. But the fact that she had been to the same place, and I guess he liked the content of the pitch as well, meant that she could give me that chance. So
has that been commissioned?
It's been published.
Which outlet was that?
That was for the Independent.
All right, great.
If you go onto the Independent travel page, it's actually on the first page, which whenever I see that for anything I've written, I'm doing little screenshots and videos to prove that is me.
Yeah, you should, absolutely, definitely. Somebody did ask if we can see some of your stories, actually, so I will put links to all your stuff in the description for this video if anyone wants to see that. So let's rattle through a few questions from me. There are a few questions from my email list that I want to get to, but maybe let's just kind of fast fire a few then at the moment. Proudest moment to date in travel writing?
Being published on BBC Travel. In my mind, I'd had of paid publications, I kind of had almost my Champions League, Premier League things, and I had assumed BBC Travel, which was very much Premier League, if that's the top one, would be something that would be probably 2 or 3 years out of reach. And so to see that published after a lengthy editing process and a couple of challenging moments, that was the moment where I actually felt I could do this.
And let's pause there, because one of my further questions is a little bit further down, but I'll say it now, because you put a post into the Travel Writing School about this BBC commission, which was wonderful, but you kind of labeled it a cautionary tale as well. So maybe just talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, so cautionary tale, because the fault in this is on me, to be clear, so I'm not looking for any sympathy or I sent a very similar pitch to two different publications. Another publication bit and commissioned an article off the back of it. This was Travel and Leisure, wasn't it? This was Travel and Leisure, yeah, correct. And I wrote it and I sent it off, and that was that. That was the first piece. That was the one I was jumping around the living room about. BBC came back the day later, when I was in the pub, which is always a good place to read that you've got a yes. And I was kind of blown away by that, etc., etc. But I thought what I had done was, I knew I had to write something original. You very obviously can't write the same thing for different publications, for all kinds of reasons. And I thought I'd written something that was genuinely different, but I got to pretty much a finished piece. It had gone through 2 or 3 rounds of edits. They seemed very happy with it, but then they saw the travel and leisure piece, which was published without me knowing about it, and were not happy because I'd used one of the same sources, and 1 or 2 of the contextual scenes were in the same place. The dialogue that was recorded and the actual points that we made were different, and so I was basically told I got quite a harsh email, but one that was probably justified. And this was about 8-9 o'clock at night. I was away in France with my partner, and they basically said, "We can't run this. Have you got any other ideas?" So it was a case of, I need to finish dinner with the glass of red wine down me, and then figure out what other angles I could give. So brainstormed a few, sent I think 4 ideas back around midnight, and then had that period of kind of just waiting, like you're in the doctor's waiting room.
4 different ideas based on the same
location.
Right.
But it was originally a story about the midnight sun in Norway, but that was kind of been, so there was one on cuisine, there was one on kind of more the local life, about how locals actually deal with that, and then there was one which was the one they ended up commissioning, was it was, the working title was The Price of Beauty, and it was about it kind of a fairly classic kind of over tourism story, but one where it's not about millions of tourists descending on Malaga or the Costa del Sol. It was one where, in the summer there's 40-to-1 ratio of tourists to locals. How do you deal with that when tourism makes up like 30-40% of the economy? That was the one they went for, but it was kind of starting from scratch. So we're told the next day, yeah, we'd like you to run with this, but you've basically got to move like the clappers. So I wrote the article in about 48 hours, went through another 3 rounds of edits, and then just had that moment of when they came back. I remember, again, what you find with all of this is that the first few articles you get commissioned, you remember where you were, when, where, what happened. But again, it was a Friday evening. I was having dinner with my mum, and I just got the email through saying, "Yep, this is good. This will be ran on the BBC Travel tomorrow," which was a Saturday. Thanks.
So just going back to the kind of what were the mistakes that you made?
Yeah.
You think? Were the 2 ideas not different enough?
I mean, I think to be honest, sending the same pitch to multiple outlets, I tailored it to the publication, but the broad content was the same. That was probably asking for trouble. I should have differentiated them more. And yeah, exactly as you said, even though in my own mind the sources, they were telling very different stories in the 2 articles, it was the same person or people, and so there was just an overlap there that was not necessary. So I guess my lesson from the cautionary tale is, for anything, if I were ever to be commissioned for 2 articles on the same destination again, to keep everything separate where possible. I mean, if you're saying I climbed Mountain X, which is the tallest mountain in Norway or something, and that's part of each story, that's fine. But the people you spoke to, the kind of the lessons you're learning, the images you're supplying down to that need to be completely separate. In a way, it's a nice lesson to have, because getting commissioned for 2 stories from one trip is brilliant. But yeah, it was it was quite a fast learning curve, but I'm glad I've had it early on in my career.
And were they angry? Like you say, you got a slightly harshly worded email. Was it kind of disappointment, or just kind of slight frustration, I guess, that they saw?
Yeah, I'm not angry, just disappointed. I remember that from school. You felt so much worse when someone said that than when they shouted at you. They were pissed off, very clearly, and I get it from their perspective, because the editor I'd worked with we'd gone through, I think, 3 rounds of edits on the original article, and I disclosed early on because that I had another piece for Travel and Leisure, and that I would let them know when it was being published. But I didn't. Again, it's my own fault. I think you're supposed to put alerts on Google so you can see if new content comes out, or check the publication on a regular basis. I did neither of those things because from when I submitted the article to Travel and Leisure, I didn't hear anything at all. So I kind of assumed it had gone into a pile for editing at some point. Unbeknown to me, the first time I actually found out that I'd been published was when the BBC sent me the link to the article. It was a bit too close. That was a bit of a sliding doors moment.
I mean, I should add that I do advocate for simultaneous pitching the exact same idea to multiple outlets, but you give it to the first one that offers you the gig, basically, and then you offer different ideas to other ones if they get back to you. So there's a slight kind of subtle difference there. But okay, so talking about these successful pitches, then, have you noticed any patterns in your pitches that have been commissioned?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of it is kind of doing the basics right. And again, this is something I've got from the Travel Writing Skool, that you need the why me, why now. And if I maybe flip it on its head and don't sound unduly negative, I think one of the reasons why I haven't been commissioned on some is that the why now isn't strong enough. That it doesn't create that kind of time-bound pressure, and something being the anniversary of something is nice, but I think the ones that I've landed has almost had the so what. I've maybe followed it up more, and probably the ones I've had commissioned as well. It's been reasonably good on the superlative front. So, the idea these are the most beautiful islands on earth. You can agree, you can disagree, but that's a talking point. That is it maybe for the sake of an email, it is a bit clickbaity, but if it gets them to open it, that's part of it. And there's probably a sense of intrigue as well, I guess, about the working title of the one on Italy that I got published was something along the lines of the perfect Tuscan base you've never heard of, and I know we spoke about those kind of titles. That's quite risky. But someone could well have heard of it, but it gets a bit of attention. So I guess it's the summary of it's making sure you've got very clearly why me to write this article, which is normally a case of having interviews or just having spoken to a wide range of people. What I found is that the more people you speak to, either in the context of a tour or just in bars and shops and stuff, you'll get little sound bites that bring what could be quite a dry pitch to life, and add that humor, that that just the thing that would make someone want to read an article or continue reading it if they've started. And then I know you're very keen on the superlatives, James, so I try and get I try and get those in there, but that title being, I guess, being intriguing enough to read on. It's a bit like, again, if you think about reading someone's CV, every time you have that professional profile, that's the window in. And that won't get you to the next stage, but if there's enough there that's of interest to cause someone to continue reading, that's the first win.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think what you're saying there is that kind of, yes, there are certain things that we talk about a lot in the Travel Writing Skool, access, which is kind of the why so your access, you've either traveled there or you've spoken to people. The superlative, which is kind of an unusual angle or something that hasn't been done before. Why now? Why is it relevant now? Why should we care about this now? All three very important aspects. And if you can get those into the headline, where you're basically demonstrating to the editor that you know what the three key parts of the story are, and this is what the focus is going to be, that's gonna produce a very assignable pitch, more often than not, or at least it's going to intrigue the editor to want to know a little bit more.
And probably the other thing, which it's almost implicit, but knowing knowing when this a destination has featured previously and in what context. Because I don't know what your thoughts are, what the rule of the game is, but I would say if you were pitching, if I'd been pitching something, so I did something for Berlin for Conde Nast, if they'd featured something similar in the past 12 months, I wouldn't have probably even pitched it, or I'd have found a completely different angle. So, but I say that I try and say that in my pitch, this last featured in X, but quite often it's in a different context. You're writing about the history of a place, and the last article talks about the cuisine. I try and be quite explicit on that. Just the editor may well know that, but
it shows you've done your research, which is
well,
awesome.
no, I mean, and I've had I think what all new writers get at some point. I pitched for something where it was an online magazine where I researched completely the wrong bits of the magazine, pitched something on a London destination, and the guy came back to me very polite, but kind of you could tell the eyebrows were raised, saying, "Yeah, we featured this last month." And that's where you have your head in your hands, thinking, "Yeah, shit, need to actually, pardon my French, but you need to actually double check that you're not hashing out something that has been done recently, because then you wasted your own time as much as anything, but also it's not the best look."
Yeah, it's a very common mistake. I think even Lola, who's in our group as well, and one of the most successful travel writers, said one of the things that makes her cringe is thinking back on times she's done exactly that, basically.
That was really comforting, though, to know that someone who's been as successful as she has actually has gone through that step as well, because you think so. I think, again, when you're working kind of solo, you think that kind of thing only ever happens to you, you personalize it, but then actually, as you've just said, it's a pretty common hurdle that we trip over.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on something that you said there, which is about the little details when you talk to people in a local place. And this is one of the things that I think you're really good at, and I've noticed in your pitches. I've mentioned it a couple of times, but it's things like you're traveling through New Mexico with tips on the backs of beer mats, because you scribble down in little insidery tips that they would give you on beer mats and napkins, and then go and try and find these things. And I can't remember some of the others, but in your trips into Scandinavia and around there, you had some very similar, very nice visual details of the trip and the experience you had gone on. And I think this is something that's kind of undersung and unsung in a lot of, not just pictures, but writing in general, which is when you really want to immerse somebody into that story, into that place. Those details are what bring it to life. Those details is how you get the story. And it becomes a story rather than just a general topic on something. So
and I think it just helped. Well, I don't think I've actually changed my behaviour from being like a passionate traveller, someone who's writing about it. I'm nosy, so I love having the conversation. I mean, it's a bit of a cheat, but I find pretty much any tour you book, a food tour, a walking tour, a kayaking tour, anything like that, which is run by locals, they always have stories and little tidbits to share, and you can just ask kind of follow-up questions. And I mean, I'm not particularly scientific. I always have my phone nearby and just make notes of, and it's normally the snippets of conversation or the little one-liners that they give you, because then when it comes to actually form the pitch for the story, as you say, you can make that kind of front and center. So it's not, going back to what you said about the importance of access, it's not really my words. I'm like the amplifier for someone who lived in the town for decades or has seen it change. And it's just asking those few questions. I mean, I still relatively speaking an introvert, so I'm not someone who's going to walk into a crowded room with strangers and start, just asking things randomly. But in that situation, it's all if you're just asking people one or two extra questions. The one I quite like is always, if you're in like a cafe or restaurant, just asking people for their own recommendations for a town or city. Like where do you go to drink with your friends, so you're not on some godforsaken tourist bar where the only language around you is English. Sorry, that's my when I travel. So
well, and more often not, people will have something that's good. It's very rare that people say, "Oh no, sorry." So,
as you said, it was the beer mats example. In New Mexico, where in a diner where we had breakfast. In America, someone's having a UK accent has currency for whatever reason. But starting talking just with the waitress, who asked how long were we in Santa Fe for, and then started scribbling down a load of places on the back, literally the back of a beer mat and the back of a receipt, of where to go. And as we were driving onto one of them, that was where the idea just came. Well, hold on, why don't we just follow this same tact of saying we're going on to this next place? Is there any way there that you can recommend? And yeah, the story out of that went on Food, Wine and Travel, that it kind of fell into my lap. And I
Mm.
know you encouraged this, saying actually that kind of quest type story
Yeah.
is quite readable, where there's some good dialogue involved with it. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, pay rates and timeliness of payments. Can you tell us what the pay rates have been at some of these big outlets and how good they are at paying?
So it's ranged from 200 pound. This is 200 sterling. So apologies, my conversion to dollars euros isn't great. That was the lowest I've had. The highest was just shy of 500. And for I think two of the four, I had a bit extra for images. There wasn't any negotiation involved.
And that's just a project flat fee, whether it's
Not per
it's
word,
800 words or 1200, they just kind of give you a fee.
Yeah. So at the start, at the start, we agreed the kind of the scope of the article. So I think they've all been 1,000 to 1,200 words, including kind of fact boxes. So when you add that in, it's been probably more like 800 to 1,000 words of actual writing. But yeah, they've all been on a flat basis, and I haven't. I'll be honest, I haven't negotiated any of them. Again, being new in, I want those names on my CV more than the money initially. But having read a couple of spreadsheets, things where people have kind of said what they've been paid, I think what I've had been is the ballpark for the publications in question.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think editors are ever trying to con people out of their work, so that's fair enough. You mentioned photos there, and you do take decent photos. I've seen your Instagram. Has that helped with winning commissions, do you think?
Yes, I think so. I think certainly the Norway stories, the landscape speaks for itself, which is helpful. What I've started to do, and I haven't won a commission based on this, so it might not work at all, but so I save all my photos on Google Photo drives anyway. I just create smaller drives of between 10 and 15 photos that I think are some of the best photos that highlight what I'm talking about, and I include a link in the pitch to those, which I think just brings to life a bit more than saying images can be supplied on request. From what I've seen, I mean, the Independent published, I think, 5 photos of mine, BBC and the Independent were 1 or 2 each. Conde Nast, which was a different type of article, it was very specific to LGBT Berlin, and places to go in the day and in the night, and at night, most places don't want people in there taking a load of photos for editorial purposes. So I was quite honest about that, but they use stock images, which was fine. So I don't think it hurts. Probably, I think for if you're going out, if I'm pitching as like a journalist, I think it's a good thing to have. I don't think my photos are of a quality that could win like a coffee table photojournalism type thing, because I'm still taking them on my iPhone. It's on my to-do list to actually get back into proper SLR photography, but that's something that I actually need to. I learned it probably a decade ago, and then with the advent of how good phones were, I kind of fell out of it.
But you also travel a hell of a lot. As far as I can tell, is that every couple of months you're going off somewhere, and that's obviously it's something I haven't thought about all that much, but I'm sure that's a big factor because of the access that gives you to places, people, like you say, and stories.
I guess you're right. Maybe, I mean, possibly because I'm coming at this from a different point of view, that I was people I used to work with say I was a full-time traveller anyway, that I'm now trying to make a career out of. So I guess where I'm fortunate is it gives me quite a diverse range of places I can pitch. I think probably the bit that I still need to learn from a business point of view is if you're going finding like all these different angles from one trip, making the most of it. I mean, I think now that, as I said, at the moment, I'm not earning a corporate wage. I'm going to be more selective over the travel for pleasure that I'm doing. So I'll probably get brought down to earth a bit. But yeah, I guess I'm fortunate from that perspective because I've got some of the contacts and also just the experiences of maybe being able to see the weird and the wonderful that could be the basis of a decent story.
But you are paying for these travels yourself, basically, at the moment, and just recouping what
I've just indeed. So I've just a couple of months ago, I got a place on my first media trip, which is happening next month through the Food, Wine and Travel Writers Association, which is going to be to Louisiana. So I'm going there anyway for their conference, but that'll be the first paid, I think it's 3-day media trip I'm going to be doing, which I'm very excited about. Which will be again a new kind of experience of pitching something where I'm being hosted, because I know that some places, not least the BBC, won't accept pitches from paid trips. So I'm about to go head first into what I know is another debate about how do you travel as a travel journalist when you're not getting paid for it directly.
On that press trip, are they paying for your flights as well, or is it just while you're there?
No, it's the accommodation and the activities. Right. I think from the minute I land in New Orleans, they look after us for 3 days. But I am getting to the US and on to New Orleans myself.
Okay, and just very quickly, because I know people will be interested, how did you actually get that press trip?
So I joined applied to join the organisation as an International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association through some contacts I met at this first conference. Once you're accepted as a member, I was accepted as a provisional member because at the time I didn't have articles published. I'm hoping that when that all comes round again, I'll be upgraded to a full member. Fingers crossed. They put on a range of press trips or fan trips before their annual conference. I think there were 4 or 5. They did a really good job with the variety of them, and members were just invited to apply, and you applied by kind of giving a bit about yourself, but then also so examples of what you've written that the destination could look at and say, yep, we like that, but also from what you can see of the itinerary, what kind of stories would you pitch and to what outlets. So I put together, I think, a series of 4 or 5 mini pitches based on different aspects of the trip, because it's fairly full on. I think it's like 14-hour days, doing all kinds of weird and wonderful things, and gave some names of places that I thought could be good recipients of them, that I know don't. I was going to say allow paid stories. Probably that's not entirely true. It's more a case to say that there's nothing obvious to say that they prohibit it.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, it's very similar to one that I went on. We could do a whole new call on press trips, I think, and how you get them and what you need to do. But it is interesting. Okay, I'm going to move on to a little bullet round, if you don't mind. These are questions from the Travel Writer community. Do Neil and Liz have a couple that I kind of bunched into we've kind of answered. This is mindset, imposter syndrome, that sort of thing. Did you ever imagine to be where you are today? How did you break the barriers? How many rejections did your ego suffer before you became successful?
Well, I don't consider myself successful yet. I'll be successful when I've got a consistent stream of commissions coming in. Week in, week out, I don't know. I mean, how many have I had so I would say I'm probably if you include being blanked as a rejection, which I think you have to, I'm probably at a ratio of 3 rejections to every acceptance. And
not bad, by the way.
Well, yeah,
a lot worse.
Yeah, let's see. I think there's plenty more to come on that one. I think you do have to realize it's not personal. That right time, right place matters a lot. But also it's being curious as to why. I think you asked me earlier, James, about what was good about, what was successful about, what did I notice that was consistent about the successful pitches. I'm probably now spending time looking at the unsuccessful ones and actually thinking, well, hold on, what was it that wasn't as good? And that's why I've come to the conclusion that I don't think the why now was as good as it could be. But also practically, it's about the whole thing about reducing your odds again. That's why I'm in the pitch writing school, because I'm still, as you said, I'm not established by any means. This is still a new game for me, and so by being able to do that once a week, potentially get feedback, and your critique, it doesn't pull punches. If it's not very good, you'll tell us, and you'll tell us why. That help. I think it helps me get out of kind of the funk of when I've had a week where nothing's come back, or I've just had a couple of rejections, you do get low. You human nature, but it's what resource can you pull on to get yourself back up on your feet?
Sure.
And try again.
Okay, Rebecca asks, how do you follow up, or do you even follow up on pitches? I think you kind of answered this previously before, but how do you go?
Of the stuff I've had paid, I think all but one has been the result of a follow up. So yes, absolutely. I have a little template that I use, which is very simple. I think it's 3 paragraphs, short paragraphs. 1, following up on from this date on this subject. I try and find a slightly different angle on the pitch, to if there's something new about the destination or something that I didn't mention that makes it kind of appealing, then just adding that in without regurgitating the whole thing, and then just a reiteration that I can supply images, etc., and would really like to write this for you. So I would say my follow-ups are probably a third or quarter of the length of the overall pitch. But yeah, I always do, and actually, James, will welcome your view on this. I tend to leave it normally 2 weeks for a follow-up. I don't know if that's too long, too short, but I would say that's quite long, but it does depend on the news hook and the timeliness of the idea, probably. Super urgent, you want to follow up within a couple of days, probably. But anything from about 5, I would say 3 days to a week for a first follow-up, even up to 2 weeks is fine. Yeah. Okay. I need to do follow-ups this week then.
Yeah. Okay, Lana asks, if you send a pitch to some outlets and no one bites, should you go ahead and write the article and post it as a blog on your own website, or save it if it's not time sensitive in hopes of getting it published down the line?
I think that's a great question. If it's something that I felt really passionate about it, yes, I would probably write it up. I've only done that on one occasion so far, just because of the timing of it. Would I post it? I probably wouldn't post it on my blog if I were confident that I could find a paid home for it, to be honest, because the amount of time you spend writing something, particularly if it's more of a narrative piece, where you're far more concerned about flow, story, structure, all of that. I don't want to say it's wasted on my blog, because it's still a window in, but when I'm showing editors what I can do and what my bylines are, if it's a piece of work I'm really, really proud of, I want it to be, I think it's usually always another editor has seen something in it and commissioned it and actually then published it. But yeah, I probably of the things I've got that are, I think, good articles waiting to be written that I'm still waiting to find a home for, I've only ever written up one of them so far. But
Lana, I think this does depend as well on where you are in your journey. If you're right at the beginning, like we heard from Phil, and why not either put it onto your blog, which Phil has done with some of the pieces. The next stage after that is writing for free for a third party blog, but there's at least an editor looking over it and giving you feedback. So if you've already done that and you're already getting paid for stuff, then you might as well keep hold of it and try and get it paid somewhere.
That's a good point. So a good example I think of that was the article I mentioned that I got published on Turkmenistan, my first ever published article, which was free. I'd written that as part of the travel journalism course, and that had already gone through edits, and that was the first piece I looked at and thought, well, actually, I think that's a little bit too good to put on my blog, and it's something I'd like to be showcased. I'm very proud of my blog, but it's the levels to things.
I'm disappointed you put it on your blog, to be honest. I'm convinced you could have sold that at some point down the line.
Yeah, possibly. I think it was because it was a visit from 2 years ago, so the time probably wasn't there. And if I ever put on my application form to go back to Turkmenistan that I'm a writer or a journalist, they're not giving me a visa, so I don't get back into anytime soon.
Yeah. Okay, Lana has another question. Is it ever a concern that you'll send an original pitch that no one is covering and they'll just have one of their own writers cover the story if they like it? So this is editors stealing ideas, basically, which is also a recurring theme in journalism land.
If I'm honest, this might be my naivety, but not really. If they choose to do that, it's kind of beyond my control. If I found out, I'd be pissed off, to say the least. But let's face it, in the relationship between freelancers and editors, as a freelancer, I don't hold much power. but there you'd always hope there's a degree of kind of trust and decency that wouldn't happen, and I think it'd be quite hard to prove anyway. If you send something in that's really good on, say, the Faroe Islands, what's to say they haven't got one of their journalists who's already either going there or had plans to? I'm sure it happens, but I don't know what the alternative would be, because I want my work published, and that means I need to put my best ideas forward. If they're so good that somebody, an editor does steal them, cold number, but it's kind of a compliment, I guess.
I mean, I would add that if your story is so good, it's probably not stealable, because you've got access to something that very few other people have, if anybody else. I mean, I think yours are not particularly stealable, Phil, because you're always traveling somewhere. This is a concern with people who don't actually travel anywhere or haven't worked in some kind of unique access into their piece that only you can bring. If you have something in your story that only you can provide, nobody can steal it. It is still, not everybody can do that. Sometimes we need to just push out stories that are okay, that are just desk research. They can get stolen. But like Phil says, that if it is stealable, it's probably not that great an idea. It might just be you, or getting your little paychecks each month. And if those are stolen, it's not a big deal. Your passion projects are the ones that actually have something unique or exclusive to you. Those are the ones that you would get very pissed off if they're stolen, but they're unlikely to get stolen because there's something unique about them from you. Okay, Janet asks, what's an ideal pitch? Story, hook, participants? Do you pitch to the publication or the person? Can we get links to some of his articles? I'll answer that and put those down in the description. But so what's your picture of an ideal pitch?
Well, hopefully you'll recognise this, James. So I think you've enough of mine. But trying to be structured about this. So introduction of who I am and bylines. So very literally a sentence at the start. What the concept that you're pitching. So the destination, the hook, and I try and get a bit of the why now in if that's not the hook. I'll normally then have a paragraph of slightly more descriptive. So if you're saying that this is the best, I've written one which is on the Pitch Whiz website about the best street in Madrid for tapas. So the hook for that, I think was that it's been voted Europe's best city for food for this year, and it has a massive food festival that happens every January, but actually the best places to go are some back streets the locals go that tourists don't know about, blah, blah, blah. But then actually, so what? So little hooks like the fact that they used to paint the doors red so drunks could find a place that was open. Apparently, I don't know whether that's true or not, but it's a great little soundbite you throw in there. The fact that when I did it, we had a guide who told us how you spot like cheap sangria and frozen stuff, which is like anathema to the Spanish. So just a couple of little bits which show, I think, the access that you've got. And then I normally have a sentence around be able to supply images. Here are some samples, and that this hasn't featured in publication X since Y or a different angle. I would love to write this for you. Please let me know what you think. That's kind of, there's no secret sauce to it, I don't think. It's just, I think it's bearing in mind, as you said, James, the why me, why now, within the why me, what's the access to it? And I think the thing you've taught me is having that is great, but get all of that as early as you can in the pitch. Don't leave. If you've interviewed, the owner of Madrid's hottest new tapas bar, don't leave that to the last sentence. And also, I think interview is a word that's used quite loosely. It doesn't mean you've sat down with them for half an hour. It could mean that you've had a 5-minute conversation with them as you paid your bill, asked a few questions, got some answers. That's me as good an interview. That's anything.
Yeah. And do you pitch to the publication or the person? Yeah. So how do you find the correct email address?
So definitely the person. I've had no success at all when I've just gone to a mailbox without having a name. Bluntly, I often just Google it. Some new places like newspapers and Travel and Leisure, Conde Nast those kind of places have the names of the editors along with quite detailed pitching guidelines, and it's always worth reading those first. Interestingly, a lot of the UK newspapers don't. So I use LinkedIn. I go back to my old corporate and just look up on there, travel editor, Sunday Times or the Independent or whoever, and go from there. I think where it's a bigger publication, it can get a bit confusing, like whether if they've got 3 different people with sub-editor in the title, who do you go to? But yeah, always a person.
Yeah, I think most journalists, most editors make their email addresses available somewhere. Not all do, I've noticed, but a bit of Googling can often bring them up. Okay, Alice asks, was wondering how freelance travel writers should go about getting continuous work in specific niches, for example, in food or military work. Is this considered a retainer? And similarly, Caroline asks, I'd like to review wellness retreats. I think Tracy does this actually a lot.
Yeah.
How do I pitch this as a total beginner with no prior articles? So this is kind of about niche writing. Got anything to say on that?
Probably not on the retainer side, because that's what I'm trying to do right now. I think if you can build a bit of a name within a publication for something. So, for example, so say Conde Nast, I had something published on LGBT Berlin because they had someone who actually, one of his hats is queer travel. And so having got in there, I'm now trying to pitch some other stuff in that same area. So if it's a publication which has a different editors for food, wellness, airlines, that kind of thing, that makes your life a bit easier. In terms of getting published without any prior experience, I think it's exactly what we've just said, is about having your own blog. It could be as simple as something on WordPress, which you don't have to pay for. But my working guess, because I don't really do hotel reviews, but would be that an editor would want to see evidence that you write well, you know what you're talking about, that kind of thing, in whatever format it can be. So I would probably follow that same path through, maybe on a quicker basis of blog, some free bylines, and then almost have that in your first sentence of the pitch of, I've been published in X, Y, and Z. Because when I got my thing published by BBC, at the time I had no paid bylines at all. So the 3 things I quoted were 2 were unpaid bylines, and 1 was an article I wrote for Tourist Board. So it's not they having them there, I think, is not as important as having like great names there, but it is
helps.
Good. Yeah.
I mean, I would also say, Alice and Caroline, niche writing. I mean, the first thing to ask is, do you really want to be a niche writer? Travel writing is kind of a niche, although it's very broad and you can do all sorts of things in there. But there's a big debate about going niche or going generalist. What are the pros and cons of each? But I would also bring up the fact, one of my suggestions to people when they want to be travel writers, for example, is just call yourself a travel writer. Change your email signature. You're not just a writer now or a blogger, you're a travel journalist. So if you want to do food, you're a food journalist. You want to do military work, you're a military writer or military content creator, whatever it might be. Just little tweaks like that in your LinkedIn and your email signature. You don't need any official qualifications to call yourself a travel writer or any other kind of writer. If that's what you want to be, start calling yourself it. Start writing free or writing blogs that operate in these niches. That's your little portfolio now, and then start pitching, come up with good story ideas in those niches, and that's your first 2-3 stepping stones done, basically. For Caroline, I would say wellness retreats, that's travel writing is competitive enough. Wellness and hotel reviews is a super competitive niche that often they'll either do in-house because they'll be on a press trip and they want to do that themselves, or they just do them through press releases. So that's a very difficult one to get into. But again, if you want to try, then you position yourself as a wellness retreat writer. You set up a blog that supports all of that, gives you credentials, and you write lots of wellness retreat pieces. And then you start pitching out. Okay, Michelle has a whole litany of questions. I'll just throw them all out there. You can pick and choose a couple that chime with you, Phil. these are very beginner questions, by the way. I think Michelle is coming from pre-zero experience. Where and who are we submitting our writing to? How do we find these organizations to submit our writing to? Actually, I'll pause there. What do you do about, who, when and who are you submitting to? How do you find who to submit articles to or pitches to?
So, yeah, I found actually, so when I started out, I was using on the Travel Writing Skool, there was a list of 259, to be precise, article outlets that would publish freelance work. And so that you could search for by but by niche. I would say niche by whether it's food, whether it's kind of his travel. So that shortlist from there. I normally have 2 or 3 places in mind. I mean, frankly, you could just ask ChatGPT. Research is an area where I think ChatGPT is actually quite helpful in finding publications I've never heard of that actually publish things in particular areas, and then who to pitch within that. That is the Google search, LinkedIn. Probably if you type it, I always try and find pitching guidelines, see if a publication has those around the kind of stories they want, how they want them submitted, who to send them to. If it doesn't detail who to send them to, which always surprised me that a lot of places don't have that, then just Editor Plus, and more often than not you'll find somewhere. But I don't know how you feel about it, James, but I wouldn't. Well, I'd always submit to a person, not to a mailbox, even if it is mail at whatever. I want a name to put on there.
Yeah, I mean, I think some outlets do say all submissions have to go to submissions at whatever, somethingtravel.com, in which case you do that. But in most cases, you'll be pitching to, invariably in about 90% plus of cases, you want to be pitching to an editor who can then respond to you. What is the best format and length for an article? How many photos should the article include?
The best, so that the first part of that, it depends, very unhelpful. But what I mean by that, this is where your research comes in. Look at what the publication already publishes. So if they do a lot of listicles, so 10 best places for tapas in Madrid, how long is that? And it's as simple as copy and paste an article and look at the word count. And I mean, I tend not to put an exact word count into my pitches because the editor tells me what they want. And if ever, I've had a couple of commissions which have been literally 2 or 3 lines, and I've always gone back and said, just to confirm, my expectation is it'll be 1,000 words, including a fact box, whatever. So I wouldn't worry too much about that particularly. For photos, if they don't tell you, I submit my personal thing is I submit a Google Drive with, as I say, between 10 and 15 photos. They will decide what, if any, they want to use. That, to be honest, I don't think is a concern for the writer. If you can supply images, great, but I wouldn't worry whether they need 5 or 10. That's up to them. If they ever want more, they would tell you.
And just on the photos front, because I know you had some questions about this, and one of our group members kind of asked it. Are you signing? You said you got paid by some outlets for a couple of your photos, or you had a slightly bumped up fee because of it. Are those photos now owned by them? Can you reuse them elsewhere? Is there a contract for the photos?
No, it was all part of the same one, and that was BBC.
Right.
That they paid an extra amount for the photo. I'd only used one in the end, which was annoying. But they used. They have the license to those.
Okay, fine. What is a typical pay rate and the turnaround for compensation? I think you've gone over that. You've been paid. I mean, generally, we're looking at around, I would say, roughly 50 US cents per word. That's kind of a slightly ballparkish figure. The BBC, I think, pays about £450 for about 800 to 1,000 word article. Maybe with
one was 470 for 1,200. So
it's around there. This is Michelle still. Are there any absolutely incorrect things to include or write about?
I mean, I'd say again, that's down to you. You could probably answer, James, about the horror shows that you've seen as an editor. From my point of view, it's looking at what they already publish and fitting within that niche with still trying to be original. So if is about adventure travel, don't pitch a story in a 5-star hotel. If you're pitching to an airline magazine, don't pitch a story which includes details of an air crash. I was reading the High Life, the British Airways in-flight magazine pitch guidelines the other day, and I think the editor must have had quite a long day when he was writing it, because he said at the end, I get at least one of these a week. And part of me was thinking, well, who on earth would ever do that? But if you thought it was a good story, yeah, I mean, it's basically, I think the do nots are pitching within the niche of the publication, and probably just within the pitch itself. I mean, I've never talked about money or anything like that in the course of a pitch, because I would have assumed that's for them to state at the start, particularly when you're new. But I don't know. I'm sure, James, you've had probably some horror shows when you've been an editor.
There are, and I've actually, I think somewhere I've written like the 5 worst pitches I've ever received or something, and I can't remember the details of all of them, but I think the main one is pitching the wrong topic to a certain editor. So he's, if you're pitching, and it's like pitching the finance, you just found an editor at the FT, for example, but you're pitching a travel story and you've managed to find the corporate finance editor or something. Obviously, that's not going to go anywhere. Pitching stuff that they've just written about, yes, that's another big no-no. I mean, for me as well, one of the big ones, possibly the biggest, that editors, when you ask them, that they hate is pitching a topic rather than a story. Yes. So when we talk about details and access and superlatives and why now and why me, this is because we're trying to get to a very specific story within a topic, within a niche. And one of the problems is people often, particularly when they new pitch topics, like, hey, I'm going to Bali to go surfing. Would you like a story about surfing in Bali? That's not a story, that's a topic. So you need to tell me as the editor, would you like a story about this girl who was surfing from the age of 2 in Bali and grew up to become a surfing champion, and she now owns a surf shop and she's just opened the world's first surfing cafe or something. Those are the stories within the topic of Bali surfing. So no editor was going to assign or even consider Bali surfing as a story. He wants to know something far more detailed.
I was guilty of that. I know at the outset, I think first couple of pictures I put in were almost, this is a really cool out there destination. Ta-da.
Yeah.
I think you saying, Jamie, it's that show, don't tell. Don't just say, and that applies to the writing of the article as well. Don't just say this is, an epic destination. It's like, well, what makes it epic? If it is that it's got the best surf school in the world, then that's the thing to go with. And I think don't assume an editor has prior knowledge of that. I'd forgotten. Yes, I'd forgotten. I'd forgotten all about the a destination is not a story, is not an angle.
Yeah. What did you just say? You just reminded me of a good point. What did you just say before
that? Destination isn't an angle. The show, don't tell.
Show, don't tell. Yes. There's something else I've forgotten. Sorry, it's gone. Final question now from David. In as much as magazines, particularly top magazines, don't respond to pitches, even from experienced writers, what did you do uniquely to elicit responses? I think we've gone into some of that, but it's just, I suppose it's really about having that pitch nailed down and having a great idea front and center. I wish I'd done something unique, because I'd then be doing that on everything I'm not getting responses to myself. I think having that the initial pitch nailed, and as much as you can and quite tight is really important. I think the follow-up needs to be enough to I'm basing this on the fact you need to follow up. The follow-up needs to be compelling enough that it actually maybe adds something to the story, without just regurgitating, as I said, but isn't just a rehash of 150 word pitch. I think that's all I've got. I don't think I haven't found a secret sauce for it. If there were one, I'd be using it on a daily basis, and I think it's just a case of not getting unduly disheartened or down when you're not getting responses, or thinking, oh, I can't do this, I got lucky, and just carrying on. But taking the time to be a bit introspective, looking at
what maybe you didn't quite nail. Because I think when you if I put my hand on my heart, I think let's say the 15 pitches that I've sent that have been unsuccessful or been ignored, probably there's 7 or 8 different ideas in there. You'd be able to do the James the red pen very quickly, but there's almost certainly something I didn't nail in the why me, the why now, the superlative, and bringing that all together, that title and subhead that makes it the kind of thing that someone firstly takes the time to read, secondly is intrigued enough by it, and thirdly thinks actually that's a good fit for us. So
exactly. I mean, I think first of all, David, the first thing is like Phil says, is don't get disheartened, because even the best travel writers are not getting they're getting pitched or getting their commissioned less than about 40% of the time. You know, Lola, who mentioned earlier, I think when she does her pitch analyses over the course of a year, she used to be, I don't know if she still is, but used to be very particular about documenting every single pitch that she did, what was the status of it, what was the success rate, the failures, and the sort of thing. Even she, you know, who's been published by all the big names, National Geographic, BBC, CNN, New York Times, was getting pitched less than about 40% of the was getting assigned with less than 40% of her cold pitches. So when someone at the top of their game is doing that, you know, you have to understand that beginners are going to get an even rougher ride than that, which is why so many travel writers have other little copywriting gigs on the side that have nothing to do with travel writing, because it's tough to make cold pitching your full-time income. This is generally, you know, I've got an interview as well on the channel with Chris Dwyer, who's a travel writer from the PR world, became travel writer, but does lots of copywriting for banks and law firms. That's his main income. And that supports his ability to then go traveling around the world and doing the glamorous travel writing as and when he can, because it just doesn't pay enough, particularly when you're middle-aged, to support, you know, a lifestyle on its own anyway. So travel writing for most people, if you want to earn, you know, 50k a year or above, is kind of a luxury, and the real income comes from other stuff. So I think it's understanding that you're pitching in a very competitive market, and what we talk about when we talk about really nailing those pitches, talking about your access, the why now, the superlative angle, is about trying to maximize the chances of a sale, even though it's still unlikely to happen. So it's about not getting disheartened, just plugging away and go through the steps like Phil has done. I mean, I wanted to get him on because he's a perfect case study of what can happen if you go through those stepping stones. Set up a blog, write for free, do this pre-work before you start pitching to the big outlets, because you're just making it even tougher for yourself if you don't. It might take a few months longer, but you will eventually get there. And like I say, certain qualities that Phil has, I think, help him a lot. His nose for the details in stories. Certainly your pitching has improved dramatically from the first one I saw, I think, Phil, compared to now. You understand what a pitch is designed to do and what editors are looking for. And you just got to go through it. You're never going to be able to listen to a call like this and all of a sudden, boom, it's done. You need to pitch 20, 30, 40 times. You need to have somebody review those pitches, try and get the feedback, which is why I do the weekly things in the Travel Writing School, because I think that is where the real value and the real learning happens, is about seeing how an editor wants you to tweak your idea so that it's something they can run. And as well as all that pre-work, which shows that you're a professional that can do the job well, because that's what editors are looking for. They are looking for people to work with regularly. And every now and again, I'll see editors say, hey, I'm looking to refresh my rota of freelancers. But that's because they've got freelancers they've worked with for years, probably, and they're on maybe retainers, or they've been pitching them stories. You know, this is Phil, this is your next stage. It's that's come to you with ideas and say, would you like to write this? Or whether they say, yeah, great, do 3 stories for us every month and we'll pay you chunk, you know, and you just file, basically. That's kind of the holy grails.
Very much, yeah, very, very much so. Can't be the dream. And I think as well, the other thing you just mentioned, James, I mean, far be it for me to give my own advice on that, but I think the thing with the pitch school that I found quite, well, very helpful hasn't just been seeing my own work, it's been seeing the work of other people, because every time I join and hear somebody else's pitch, I don't think there's been a single one yet where I haven't thought, oh, that's a good little way of phrasing something, or that's a good niche, or just ideas. And it's all, I mean, I think we all pitch very, very different ideas. So it's that collaboration over competition. We're not, it's very unlikely two people from the pitch school are going to be pitching the same story to the same outlet. So actually learning from others, it's been very valuable in an industry that it feels quite isolated a lot of the time.
No, for sure. I think the community aspects and learning and just batting ideas around can be very helpful sometimes. And you've reminded me, we need to do another kind of pitch week soon, don't we? I think I had one lined up for September. So yeah, thank you. I'll get on that and try and set that up. You're going off somewhere later this month, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm off. So I'm off to Sri Lanka on Sunday. So that actually is a holiday. That was pre-booked. I think it was booked on New Year's Day, the kind of classic British winter day where you're like, oh, it's all miserable. Let's book a holiday from like 7 months hence. But yeah,
when you say holiday, do you mean you're going to turn off the travel writing pitching brain, or is it that? Well, I'm
definitely turning off the pitching. So I'm turning off the pitching brain in terms of writing or following up any pitches. But we've got a couple of tours booked where I'll be there with my phone making little notes. I'll be taking photos. So when I come back, I'm sure there'll be some ideas there that I will try and bundle up into some kind of pitches, because it seems a waste to go somewhere so incredible and not try and do something with it. But I haven't told my partner that.
Well, you could maybe blag a hotel room or two on the back of that as well, if you promise them a little write-up or something. But
yeah, there you go. That's probably that's one of the next steps, actually being a bit more deliberate and a bit more savvy about that business side of it, of what you can get. And actually, Trav Media, I haven't done this properly, but you can put in your trip plans where you are traveling to. And I had someone actually contact me from a Sri Lankan hotel chain. Unfortunately, not the kind of niche that I'm wanting to probably stay in, because it's a bit different to what I'd normally do. But that kind of thing, I thought, I could actually be a lot better at this. And yeah, who knows?
My brother went to Sri Lanka a couple of years ago, and they even gave him 2 or 3 free nights at a hotel. If he's not a travel writer or anything, but they said, post on your social media about us a couple of times and you'll get free nights. So I think there might be some places in some very, particularly if it's low season, where they're just not getting any guests, they don't, and they see the value of a social media post as being better than a few bucks. So you never know. Like you say, if you don't ask, you don't get. So
absolutely, keep
it in mind. Phil, thank you so much. We've overrun by 20 minutes or so, but that's been really great, really helpful, I'm sure, for a lot of people. I'm going to look forward to seeing some Sri Lanka pitches to review soon.
Oh, no pressure then, but thank you. Thanks, I really enjoyed that.
Cheers, Phil. Take care.
See you later.